So number 12 on your homework is similar to this problem. And it's a word problem that forces us to write an equation for a situation that we have. So here a caterer charges $200. So $200 fee plus $18 per person served. The cost as a function of the number of guests is shown in this graph. So here we have cost on the y-axis, and then we have number of people or guests on the x-axis. And so what they have here is, remember how we talked about an equation of a line is in this form: y equals mx plus b. And remember, this represented what? What did that b represent? Hopefully you said y-intercept, because that's what it is. And I also talked about how it is our starting point. It's where we began. And so that helps us out in figuring out what goes in place of b. Now this is our slope. This is the constant change. It's our slope. It's the constant change of the line. The line has a steepness to it, and the constant change is that slope. So this is the constant change of x. It's what's changing x every single time. And so when we think about this, our y values, well, our y values are going to represent what it does on the y-axis. This is our y-axis, and y values are cost. So we're going to have cost here. So I'm going to put a variable in place of this. I'm going to call this one, maybe instead of y, I'm going to call this c. C for cost. And so c is going to represent my cost. And then in place of this x, this term here, I'm going to use what the axis tells me. So this is typically my x-axis. I'm going to call this people, or in the problem they use the word guests quite often. So I'm going to change that to guests. And so I'm going to write down G for guests. And again, you don't need to use x and y. You could use c and g like I'm going to do. So our c, our cost, equals, and then our slope. What is changing the x value, or in this case our g value, our guess each time? Well, we look at it up here. A caterer charges $200 fee plus $18 per person, per guest. And so that means that $18, this is what's changing the number of the cost each time. It's $18 for every guest. And so that's the slope. So the slope is 18, and the word per kind of gives it away. That's typically going to tell us that this needs to be the coefficient. And the coefficient is, in this case, the slope. So it's our coefficient of the variable. So 18, and then I'm going to use g for guess. And then we have plus our constant. What's our constant? What we start with. This is it right here. This is the starting point. It starts at 200. Notice that the line begins right here. 200. That's where it starts. That is our starting point. And so we'll go C equals 18G plus 200. So that's part A. That is the writing an equation that represents the cost as a function of the number of guests. And that's why I use G, because they said it's a function of the number of guests. Well, let's take a look at the next part, letter B. B we've kind of already talked about. It says identify the slope and the y-intercept and describe their meaning. Well, the slope is what changes the cost each time. So the slope in this case is 18. And $18, and it's what changes the cost each time a guest is added. So every time we have an additional person, we end up having to increase the cost by $18 because it's $18 for every person, for every guest. So that's the slope. So that's what changes the equation each time. C being the cost, $18 times the number of guests plus the $200 gives us that total cost. The y-intercept is $200, so it equals 200. And the reason why what that represents is it's the fee. It's where we start. It's the initial charge. Without even having one guest, you're still going to be charged that $200. So the initial charge for the product. And then letter C says find the cost of catering an event for 200 people. Typically, you go to your graph, go over to 200 people, and go up and see what that cost is, but can't really do that on this because we don't have enough space. So this is where the equation comes in. We go ahead and use that equation. C represents the cost. That's what we're going to try finding. And then we go ahead and substitute the numbers in. So we have 18 times by the number of guests. Well, the guests is 200 for this event here. So I'm going to put 200 in place of the total number of guests that we're going to have. And then plus that initial charge of $200. So when I multiply this, I go 18 times 2 gives me 36. And then I just bring down these other two zeros. And then I add 200 to this. And this is going to give me my final cost. So my final cost is, once I add those two numbers together, 3,600 plus 200 gives me 3,800. And there it is. That is the cost of having 200 people attend the event. So just quick review here is that the initial fee is always going to be our constant. That's going to be our y-intercept. When we see the word per or each or daily, those are words that tell us that we are going to have a slope, a changing cost for that term. And those two get added together, and they equal a final cost in this case. So those are the different types of problems you see. Good luck on tonight's homework.